So his idea, his notion was, under the auspices of a pandemic, we are going to see significant social changes, such as rationing of our power in order to save the planet.
Oh, yeah, I read about this quite a while ago.
Is that going on? Because please tell us if that's what it is, because I think we'd all much rather know if we're being manipulated.
Yeah, I think it is going on. I think these elites in the World Economic Forum and other places do have an agenda, and they want to push this green agenda, you know, as Dominique said, and which is completely mad. You know, we've had coal, we have gas. They provide, or they can provide, our energy for years and years to come, because we got so much of it under the ground.
But they are finite.
Well, they are finite, but
they will run out at some point.
But there's enough in the UK to last us for decades, if not centuries.
Exactly.
And coal as well, particularly. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, and because of these unforeseen circumstances, we're going to end up burning more coal anyway. The government has had to bring forward planned closures of coal-powered plants precisely because we don't have the capacity.
Yeah, to postpone the closure.
Because we haven't moved quick enough on renewables.
You could say it's because...
Well, the renewables are no good. They don't provide energy when the sun stops shining and the wind stops blowing.
Well,
so we need a permanent backup of either nuclear or fossil fuels all the time.
It doesn't work like that. The whole point is you use renewables when the wind is shining, you put it in storage, and then you use it when you need it.
But we've not how the technology. It's not just the UK. That's not just the UK.
That's how the technology actually works.
I agree that you need to be able to store it, to use it when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. I get that. That's what happens.
You still need to deal with that with fossil fuels as well. That's how it actually works.
However, is this just a UK policy problem, or is it a global issue? So you can't really just be the government's not done this, because so many other countries haven't done this.
And I think what a lot of people will be concerned about listening to this debate as well is how we've managed to get ourselves into this position in terms of our national generation, our power security, our energy security. Why are we so reliant on Russia?
Sorry, they've closed 11 coal power stations since 2015, which is ridiculous. We've only got 3 left, and they're supposed to close this year. I mean, it's good that they're thinking about keeping them open, but then, of course, you know, as well as the crazy pursuit of net zero policy, there's the whole situation with Russia and sanctions on Russia, which is completely avoidable. I mean, we shouldn't have put sanctions on Russia. That's what I said from the very beginning, and they've backfired on us because now there's all the tension. They keep escalating the tension rather than de-escalating and getting back to normal relations, so there won't be a problem this year with the supply of oil and gas from Russia. That's what we need to get back to.
I don't want to go down a tangent in terms of whether we should or should not have put sanctions on Russia, but Mayata, is David... You're going to tell me he's wrong, right? In terms of saying that we should be pushing on with our non-renewables, at least in the short term?
Well, of course we should. It's an absolute no-brainer. Even if you don't believe in net zero, which I think is a bit bonkers, but that's fine. Let's park that for a second.
That's a bit rude.
Even if you don't believe in it, because
a bit bonkers.
Despite the fact that all the science is saying that the impacts of not dealing with this will be absolutely catastrophic here and in other countries, despite the fact that we're seeing the impacts of it with islands sinking underneath the sea. But let's park that for a second.
The sea level hasn't gone up at all. This is the scaremongering. This is the scaremongering you get from the IPCC.
It's where the mainstream scientists are. But let's park that for a second. Even if you don't believe in the agenda, surely you must believe in the idea that we should diversify and mix, because that's the way we build security. And if we have the capacity to generate energy through onshore, if we have the capacity to generate energy through wind or solar, why on earth would we not do it on security grounds?
If there are new forms of energy which can survive on the free market and without...
why would you
I'm answering the question, so if you let me answer the question, I will answer the question. So if we can find new forms of energy, new sources of energy, which can survive on the free market without huge government subsidies, which put up, if you please let me answer, which put up people's energy bills. It's not, because it gets a load of government subsidies, especially the offshore wind farms. They have huge government subsidies in the tens of billions of pounds, and that's what's putting up people's energy bills. So that's really the wrong strategy for the country. We need to continue to use fossil fuels until we have a viable alternative, which isn't going to put huge amounts of money on people's bills and keeps on putting the price of petrol up. And I think that's where people are in the real world, rather than maybe an academic department where you sit.
I mean, just to unpick a few things. Firstly, we subsidise fossil fuels as well. We subsidise all of our energy mix. And actually, if you look at the data, you take something like wind. Yes, we subsidised it when it was new technology. It is now cheaper than fossil fuels. That's the point. Renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels, because once you've built your wind power, It's free. It's just the wind coming or not. Then it's about storage. So even if you don't believe in net zero, which I do for other reasons, if you don't believe in it, just purely economic sense, it makes sense to diversify it. It makes sense to move to a diversity of energy mix that are cheaper.
The problem is
your arguments
you
make no sense.
You don't have enough wind and solar power all the time to supply people's energy. And what we're talking about here is the winter, particularly the peak times in the morning and evening peak. There simply won't be the energy there. That's why there is the threat of blackouts, again combined with the Russia situation. So we need to have continual production of energy from fossil fuels in order to make sure the lights don't go out. So we need to make sure that the coal power stations that they were going to close stay online. And there's not enough time to build new nuclear power stations, which they're talking about. That's a good thing, but it's not going to come online for years and years and years because they take a long time to build.
Do we all agree that actually what's happening at the moment with the fact that our power, all our gas and electricity bills are so extortionate and they're going so high, that we are all making extra effort to cut down our bills, and therefore that probably is good for the planet, regardless of how you think we should be getting our energy.
But, I mean, who is
David?
doing?
Well, at the moment it's summertime. It's good to be energy efficient, absolutely, but we don't want the situation when the winter comes when people need heating. Otherwise, they might, freeze to death or something.
Go on, Dominic.
And this is the thing, poorer people, the masses, because most people aren't, rich, they aren't billionaires. We're being convinced that. And there's virtue in suffering. And there isn't, because the people that work for the supranationals, the people that work for the massive conglomerates, they're not the ones that are going to be making all of these energy sacrifices and doing all of this rationing. It's people that can't really afford it. And that's the issue. While I think that, you probably believe that the green agenda and net zero is this commendable thing that's going to save the earth. What it's doing actually is it's handing all of this power to government, to supranational organisations and people that I don't believe really have the best interests of individuals at heart.
Ultimately, again, Mayata, there will be a very few people who get very, very rich from the green industry.
Happening.
It's already happening. Whilst the majority of us are worried about putting on our fire.
100% on that. So for me, there are two things. The transition to net zero doesn't have to be painful, and actually the role of government is in order to smooth that transition and make sure it's just. Secondly,
do you trust government to do that, though?
Secondly, there is a world in which we transition and there is a handful of people, in the way, by the way, that a lot of our economy works, so it benefits a handful. And for me, actually, there's huge opportunities. So, for example, you look at what the Netherlands have done, a massive onshore wind farm that's owned by people in the community. So when there is investment that goes in, the dividends of that goes to ordinary people, they have a stake in it. And actually, I think there's a massive opportunity to say, as we build this new technology and this new infrastructure, we should own it. It should be in our hands and work in our interest.
But is that what the people that are pushing this agenda are saying, though? Because we're all talking about the IPCC's climate report. Even they themselves said that we are going to need massive societal change in order to pursue this net zero agenda that they want. What does that societal change mean? I mean, in their actual report, they were citing Marxists with no actual critique of what was being said. Does it mean that we all suffer as a collective and those that hold the levers of power don't? And I think that's what we sort of have to be a bit...
And does it mean that we even understand what that means for most of us? And does it mean that we need to have some sort of referendum on net zero?
What's really frightening is some of these people are now talking about carbon credits and carbon social credits and capping and so on. So you will have a certain amount of carbon that you can use every day. And people are talking about central bank digital currency, which will be programmed so you can only spend them on certain amounts of certain things, other things, and the carbon will be...
So I think the two things to say is that there isn't, of course, any transition is difficult. Any transition we've had is always difficult, but there is a way in which you do it in a way to protect people and ensure the upside. And there's a huge opportunity in all of this. And for me, in a world where, quite frankly, our economy doesn't work for people are shafted all the time, there is an opportunity for us to use this transition to shake things up and to actually deliver some better jobs, to deliver dividends in terms of living standards. It has to be deliberate. But the idea that we could just sleepwalk into, so even if the scientists are 50% right, and I think they're 100% right, but even if they're 50% right, the impacts on living standards will be absolutely profound for people in this country and people worldwide. That's the sacrifice, that's the risk you're willing to take, not which seems to me completely out of whack.
Can we go to a quick email? Ray has emailed to say, how does your panel suggest we store electricity from wind and solar? It's ridiculous. We have 40 years of coal in the ground, plus gas and oil. Nuclear has to be the long-term answer. Miata.
So that's what we do now. So the way that the capacity market works is that we generate energy even from fossil fuels and we store it. Now, one of the problems we have in this country is that we don't have enough storage facilities, which is one of the things that the government's looking to do in order to deal with this issue. But we already store our energy. That's how it works. We store it when we don't need it so much, and then we release it when we have high demand.
There's only a tiny amount of storage capacity, and the problem with that is it relies on, you need cobalt and lithium, and the environmental problems of mining that are immense. You know, we all hear about the children who have to mine this in Congo and so on, that, you know, live in slave-like conditions.
Isn't there also just a massive problem with our housing as well? Because the reason that we've all got such high bills as well is our houses are so poorly insulated. And that seems to me is something that the government could be doing really easily. Am I right?
100%. So the rate at which we've insulated our homes, as I said, has gone down 90% since 2012. And so this is something you could do and do quite quickly. You know, we've been saying great homes upgrade. If you had a national effort, said this is one of our #1 missions, you could insulate millions of homes over the course of the next 3 years. And you start with low-income households. You start with households in social housing. That's the way we bear down on bill. It has to be part of the answer. And we can do it relatively quickly.
Yeah. OK.